Story 1. San Diego here. Over 60,000 attended the main event downtown by our beautiful harbor. Additional thousands were at smaller rallies throughout the county. I was honestly uneasy about going, but it all had a positive feel. Lots of funny signs and a mixture of ages and people. It was good to see young people and families there. The mood was celebratory, and the police were supportive. I am glad I went and proud of my city. Story 2. I did. I live in what I thought was a professional Trump town. I thought the protest would be me and a couple of others. The crowd was so large I could not see where it ended. Story 3. I knew there was going to be a sizable turnout. I did not expect that during the march. The front of the march reached the intended destination before about a third of the back had even started moving from the starting point. In an area with that kind of turnout, the point is to demonstrate how much resistance an attempt to enforce authoritarianism would encounter and what a logistical nightmare it would be to try to pacify the region. In that regard, huge success. But arguably nothing we did today was as important as the smaller marches in much more conservative regions. Even tiny communities showed up in the hundreds. The point there is to make it clear that it is not a loud minority opposed to this administration's behavior. It is a lot of people everywhere. It is the friends and neighbors of people who were certain that their support of the former president's actions was shared by everyone around them, and are developing an understanding that even if it is only a minority of the population willing to demonstrate, that minority is still a whole lot of people. We did well today. More remains to be done. This is far from over. But we did well. Story 4. It was surreal this morning in Minneapolis. Shock, grief, and anger, of course, as news of the assassination spread right around the time we were all getting packed up to attend. Then the news came out that the shooter had planned to target the protests, and no one knew if it was one person or a group. Then came the announcements from government, police, and event organizers that the protests were either canceled or unsafe. There was a lot of confusion in group chats and many calls. Are you still going? Should we? Should we bring the children? Where will you be? Let's stick together. Stay safe. I am so glad I made the decision to go. I was scared. My friends were scared. But it did not feel right to let someone with no identification and a bad cowboy hat stop us from speaking up. I have a lot of privilege. I am white, a citizen, able-bodied, educated, and have easy access to transportation. I knew others would not be able to attend safely, and I wanted to be there for them. The people at the protest were wonderful, but no surprise there. We laughed and supported each other, and there were some amazingly great signs. There was no violence. It was good. I heard initial estimates of the big state capitol rally reached 80,000 people, which is amazing for a canceled protest in a small city during a scary lockdown. I am really proud of how we showed up. Story 5. I am disabled, and so is my girlfriend. We taped signs on the car and drove around town, visiting as many protest areas as possible. We were scared to join the large crowds in our wheelchairs, especially if things became dangerous. This felt good because we participated in a way that was easy on our bodies. Story 6. My brother and I went to our local event. A couple hundred people showed up in Deep Red, Texas. Inspiring is an understatement. Story 7. It was invigorating. I think it is valuable for many reasons. I saw this great quote today from Ben Collins on Blue Sky, which sums up a very important aspect of showing up for these events. Fascism is isolating and lonely. Its very goal is to make you feel like you are the only person unwilling to accept a cult of personality. On days like today, you fully realize there are more of us than there are them. I think it also helps legislators on both sides of the aisle to have some backbone and make better political decisions. Story 8. Participated in a Purple City event. The turnout was huge, and it was extremely encouraging to know there are so many people who feel the same way. Probably approached 10,000 people. Story 9. Salt Lake City today. There was a massive turnout at both protests. The march was impressive, but there was a shooting. Story 10. I am a supporter. I wanted to go, but I am disabled and chronically ill, and my body decided to protest existence today instead of tyranny. I am proud of everyone who went. Thank you. Story 11. I am not American, but I want to express my respect for all of you Americans who turned out. I believe you have shown that the traditional America, which much of the rest of the world respects and feels an affinity with, still exists. Story 12. I thought a 7-mile protest along the main commercial thoroughfare was a crazy idea. The space was filled from Sunnyvale to Palo Alto, California. I ended up at a democracy fair in a 19-acre park, and it was jam-packed. Story 13. I participated in a rural town with maybe 500 people lined along the highway and mostly positive responses from drivers. A few diesel truck drivers were rolling coal in our faces, but I would say 95% was positive. Very encouraging. Story 14. Showed up in my mid-sized town, estimated 10,000 to 15,000 people in attendance. All ages, all walks of life, all peaceful. Story 15. The crowd in Chicago was so thick it was hard to move. It expanded for blocks. I actually got lost trying to find my way back. Wonderful feeling being surrounded by love. Story 16. Tiny Kansas town with a population of 40,000 in a rural area. A couple hundred people came out. Only one reckless driver was driving back and forth in front of us. He tried to accelerate quickly on wet pavement and nearly hit a couple of cars when he lost control of his vehicle. This happened about 50 feet from a fire truck, so hopefully he was reported. I did not see any police officers, but the fire department seemed to be on hand in case of an emergency. It is necessary to keep up the pressure. The attacks on due process are frightening. The threats to arrest Democratic politicians are frightening. The assassination of politicians is frightening. Story 17. They are estimating we had 10,000 turnout here in San Antonio. Our governor sent the National Guard to defend the Alamo even though the protest was at Travis Park, blocks away. We marched over there too so they did not feel lonely. There was no violence of any kind and even the police managed to behave themselves. I saw people of all ages, races, orientations, and entire families from elementary school children to grandmothers with canes. My takeaway is we are not nearly as divided as they want us to believe. Story 18. I would have, but I needed a break from politics and my father was visiting. So we built model airplanes together. Story 19. I participated in a protest in a southwest Ohio suburb. It was an enjoyable time with very few offensive gestures. One man arrived in a large red truck displaying flags. We chanted "Taco Truck." He made one more pass after that and then left. Story 20. I worked the night before, so I was only able to go for about an hour before going back home to sleep before my next shift. I was glad I did, though, as it was a large crowd. Story 21. The event took place in a small area, but the turnout was impressive, with a couple of hundred people attending. Story 22. Upstate New York. Approximately 5,000 people. Feeling good. Got flipped off a few times, nothing special. There were more rude people during the last big Black Lives Matter protests. Not sure what that means. We have had a couple here, but that was the biggest one so far. Favorite sign? Happy birthday, dickhead. Story 23. I walked a few blocks with the Toronto March. It was upbeat, with lots of funny signs and strong love for our southern neighbors. The crowd size was probably around 1,000. Canadians would be very grateful if America could resolve its problems. Story 24. 100% participated. It was awesome to see so many people promote democracy and want to save the Constitution. Story 25. I was at the Iowa City protest in Iowa. Overall, it was a positive experience. Well over 2,000 people, including many families and elderly individuals, a tactical truck, numerous American flags, the national anthem, and a moment of silence for the Minnesota representatives attacked earlier today. My only complaint is consistent with other protests here this year. Organizers need to ensure that speakers stay on message and do not veer into unrelated topics. It has been frustrating and alienating to many when foreign affairs are brought up, especially when the focus is needed elsewhere. Story 26. It was amazing to see how well attended all the protests were, and how poor the attendance was at the Tangerine Tacos parade. Story 27. An Australian man who has been following United States politics for a long time. It may mean nothing but words, but I am so proud of how many people are like me and want to defend democracy. I would love to hug all 5 million of you. Thank you so much for showing the world. You made history today. Story 28. I participated. It was awesome. I did not attend Black Lives Matter or not my president demonstrations during the first term, and I regret it. I am making up for lost time now. Story 29. I went, and it was amazing. I live in a conservative state, and I have cut off friends and family. I make calls to my elected representatives. Living here and reading some comments online started making me feel like maybe I was crazy. Felt like humanity was gone. People were and are supporting immigration and customs enforcement. The former president is seen as a messianic figure, and so on. I went expecting a few hundred. There were thousands. I wanted to cry right then and there because people do care. People do not want this. I am not crazy. It is wrong what is going on. I am ready for the next event and still making my calls. I am re-energized knowing I am not alone. Story 30. I was too sick to attend in person, so I wrote "No Kings" on my car and drove nearby to get some medication. I received a few honks. Then I ate some delicious chicken tacos while watching protest coverage all day. Story 31. I went to a smaller event in Florida. About 1,000 people were there. Mostly supportive cars were driving by, but there were unhappy people not pleased to have their trip serenaded by the song "No Kings." Story 32. I live in a deep red small town. It made me feel a bit better about things to see so many people come out. The turnout was not huge, but for this community, I was surprised by how many people were there. There was also a lot of support from people driving by. Story 33. It made me feel so American. What the Trump administration is doing is extremely un-American, and I was excited to resist. There were 1,800 protests across the nation today. I live in a small town, so the one I went to had only a few hundred people, but some in bigger cities had thousands. It was peaceful, and no supporters of Donald Trump showed up. Everybody honked at us, and I felt so proud. It takes many to make change, and today millions of Americans came together for the same cause. No kings since 1776. Story 34. Went to New Jersey. I have also attended a couple of other protests so far this year. This was the largest crowd I have seen yet, despite the fact that it was pouring rain. The crowd had a lot more people my age and younger compared to previous protests. I drove to other protests in the area afterward to honk and show support. Story 35. Atlanta, Georgia, we had 2 very large ones and many smaller ones. Everything was peaceful. Story 36. Suburb of Atlanta here. We attended in Ruby Red, Forsyth County. I was overcome by emotion when we arrived. People came from all around, with flags and signs, of all ages, colors, and ethnicities. Many cars drove by honking. We saw a Hispanic man drive by crying in gratitude. It was a moving experience and gave us hope for a better day. Story 37. Great turnout, lots of good energy, beautiful people, and more importantly, relegated the Cheeto parade to below the fold, as they say. Only a handful of negative experiences occurred across the whole nation of nearly 2,000 protests, and most of those seemed to be after or at the end of the planned events. I would say that was a pretty successful day. Story 38. In my small town, I learned that the loudest Donald Trump supporters are only online. I saw hundreds of people from Latino, Black, Asian, and white backgrounds. Everyone was young and old. Those who couldn't attend stood outside, drove their cars, and honked in support. Later that day, I went to a larger city to protest at the county buildings and courthouse. We gathered in thousands and took to the streets. People were cheering and hanging flags from their apartments. Others had their hotel windows open, cheering for those of us in the street. Cars honked alongside us, waving flags from the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community, Mexico, Los Angeles's flag, and the American flag. Some people had a giant United States flag hanging from the top of a parking structure. It was like a giant block party. I felt united with my country, And now I've been watching videos of even larger protests in other cities. I was terrified to protest yesterday, but the sense of community I felt will definitely fuel me to continue fighting for what's right. Story 39. I really wanted to, but I had no one to go with and I was scared of going alone in case it escalated. Story 40. I was there in my medium-sized town. Very peaceful, very anti-felon Donald Trump, and very pro-we the people. Story 41. Pointless. We removed the only king we had an issue with in 1776. Claiming the President of the United States is a king shows how delusional some people are. No matter the positives, some will hate our current President of the United States if they do not align with their core values. Story 42. Waving Mexican flags and burning police cars in another country will not convince average Americans. In fact, it will have the opposite effect. Story 43. I went to my local event. It was great. Lots of people having a great time, honking and shouting. A very fun and positive atmosphere. Story 44. Great turnout in my city today, Burlington, Vermont. Sadly, I arrived a bit late, so it was hard to see the speakers clearly. Story 45. Everyone was peaceful and friendly, and we had no tension with the police. Felt like they were there to keep us safe, not to threaten us. This is anecdotal evidence, but it was our experience today. Often, things change at night when people looking for a fight stay out late and cause trouble. However, we must not forget that, most of the time, the vast majority of people are there with good intentions. Story 46. I went, and I am glad I did. About 300 protesters and many encouraging honks from passing cars. One man wearing a Make America Great Again hat ambushed me with a sudden interview, holding his phone camera toward my face while he asked why I do not like Donald Trump, whether I think Donald Trump lost in 2020, and if I would rather have Joe Biden. There were many loaded questions, but I had answers for him. Story 47. 1. It was packed. It was a much-needed message directed at Donald J. Trump and his administration. It was largely ignored by Donald J. Trump. It will not be just a protest if he continues on his path. Stop asking me my thoughts and how I feel. You sound like a comment-scraping bot. Story 48. Denver here was planning on supporting it and going for a burger and a beer downtown as well. Ended up avoiding it because a lot of people on the Denver subreddit seemed set on confrontations and vandalism. I replied to a thread and encouraged people to be peaceful and not cause property damage and got some really angry replies. I think like 40 downvotes and 20 replies all implying vandalism and violence was an appropriate response. I skipped it. It is a really important issue for me, and I don't want to see it distracted from by egocentric acting out. It appears it was peaceful with around 5,000 people. Posts were made in that subreddit and left up calling for people to go out at night and protest because the police moved people off the streets after around 6 o'clock. It is a really suspect subreddit with how it is moderated. I can't help but wonder if it was far right-wing or far left-wing individuals trying to incite something. Story 49. Boston was buzzing. The cool thing was I am from a small town in Massachusetts. All the towns around me were having protests. Wealthy, quiet, woodsy towns. People came out. Even Duncan was unusually busy and you just knew why. Everyone was going into Boston. Driving to Boston, the inbound highway was as busy as a Monday morning rush hour. The outbound was quiet. I know not all of them were going to the same place, but it did feel like I was part of something. Story 50. Another meaningless protest that will be forgotten by Monday. That is all liberals are nowadays. Virtue signaling and performative activism. The days of meaningful change are long gone. Story 51. Took the kids and it was a huge success. Lots of positive honking and waving from cars going by. A few people yelled at us, but we just laughed and held up peace signs. Once again, it was mainly older adults protesting with us. They loved seeing teenagers getting involved, and the whole experience made me tear up several times. I always feel more hopeful and motivated to keep fighting after attending a protest. Story 52. The turnout was surprising in a positive way. People are becoming aware. People are concerned. People are standing up to the nonsense. I hope to see more of it. Story 53. I loved it. Everyone was happy and excited. The energy was positive and renewed hope in many. There were many awesome signs and great ideas for the next event. We had a positive impact. People were constantly coming in and adding to the powerful message. The young woman in the truck with the Donald Trump flag and Patriot flag was rather funny. She tried, but frankly, she was just a side note. Story 54. I went around noon. I wanted to stay longer than I did, but today was day one breaking from tetrahydrocannabinol again, and I was there by myself. My grump factor and the heat were not playing well together. I had been there for maybe 15 minutes when I saw a lady get upset that there was a speaker supporting Palestine. She started complaining loudly that the protest was not about that and that they should stop talking about it. Someone next to her gave her the finger for it. Then the lady hit him on the arm. The guy's friend caught him before he escalated things further. It was a minor episode, but I found myself emotionally keyed up more than I should have been since my brain is sorely missing its phytocannabinoids. I came home to eat lunch and had planned to go back out since I live nearby, but my mood swings got even worse after lunch. My icky brain today aside, I am proud of my fellow Denver residents and what appears to be an impressive and mostly peaceful national protest, drawing further shade on the concurrent sad birthday parade. Story 55. I avoided it because I was celebrating 250 years of the United States Army. I know more veterans than people foolish enough to think Donald Trump is a king. Story 56. Oh look, Donald Trump is still president. Immigration law is still being enforced across the nation. What exactly did you hope to accomplish? Story 57. What is the over-under on how many of those protesting showed up to vote? No kings, pink hats, BuzzFeed articles on funniest signs, the validation that comes from broadcasting your activism on Instagram. It is all self-indulgent. It accomplishes nothing. Protests make you feel like you did something, but all you really did was walk in a group from one location to another. Representatives in swing states and districts might take note, but the chances are it will all be forgotten by next week when there is a new issue in the news. Liberals would be better off putting this energy into actually voting, but that is not as Instagrammable, I suppose. Story 58. Outside of Washington, D.C., nice to see the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia rally against Donald Trump, who has done so much harm to our people's careers and livelihoods in the region. I participated in the closest one but was surprised at how many small protests were happening near almost every neighborhood. Story 59. I had other plans made well in advance, so I was unable to attend, but I was glad to see many people attending in different cities. I went to a rally earlier in the week as well. Story 60. I did in a red city too. It was bigger than I thought it was going to be. The weather was better than it had any right to be. I hate protest, not the idea, the vibe. I just never got into the whole pep rally thing. Am I really worried about the direction the United States is going, though? This has been the third one I have been to, and there will probably be more. I really hate it. Honestly, the only negative encounter there involved me, and it got dispersed quickly. Story 61. Good job. Cannot end here though. Waving a sign for a few hours is not enough. I am not disparaging anyone, and I understand not everyone can dedicate their lives to a cause. But we cannot pat ourselves on the back until this is not only done, but we hold people accountable and put barriers in place to assure it never happens again. Story 62. I went to the protest in my town. It was awesome. We had about 300 people show up. The signs were great, and everyone was friendly and well-behaved. Story 63. It felt good knowing how many of us will push back. If it gets much worse, they will face a general strike that will hit them where they live. Story 64. I did not participate, but I honestly think it is awesome to see so many people exercise their First Amendment right. Story 65. I did in Seattle. I was at one earlier at Seattle Center that was mostly Generation Zers, and I was thrilled to see people across the age spectrum today. Story 66. Not the first and will not be the last to peacefully protest in unity against this administration that is blatantly committing crimes against our marginalized communities in Boston. Story 67. I was impressed by the number of people I saw who were in their 50s to 70s. I am in a college town, so I was expecting a lot of younger adults, but it was a mix of all ages. Story 68. I think it is great, but I hope it is accompanied by action. I do not want this to be a, well, I did the thing, I am done now scenario. Protest without action only accomplishes so much. Story 69. Omaha here. Our rally had a few thousand people turn out, and I was surprised how many people were over the age of 50, veterans, disabled, etc. What is really surprising me are the turnouts in smaller, deep red Nebraska cities like Grand Island and Fremont. There are reportedly thousands of people that turned out for no kings in these Republican strongholds. Story 70. I went with my mom to a protest in a nearby city. It was great. I think there were a few thousand protesters. I was glad to see how the community came together to support each other. There were some hecklers, including a red truck with a Trump flag, who tried to disrupt the event. One of them punched an elderly man protesting with us, while the other pressed down on the gas pedal, causing some of us to cough. Despite that, I kept raising my sign and had a good time. They cannot stop us. Story 71. New Jersey here. Lots of small towns in fairly red New Jersey had amazing turnouts in spite of the rain. Some would have been bigger, but many locals went to the big event in Philadelphia. Story 72. I hope people said what they wanted and had fun. There is no real effect. It is a blip on the news radar. It is not even a top story. Story 73. I did not. I could not care less about it. I am tired of hearing all the noise coming from one country, especially one that tells everyone else how great they are and how they are the best at everything. Source. I do not live in the United States. Most of us do not. Story 74. I am visiting my parents in a small town at the tip of Washington. 2,000 people came out to the local event, including us. There were almost more people than I thought lived in the town. It was great. Story 75. I accidentally did when I was driving to get McDonald's. The car in front of me was holding out signs and I got roped in, I guess. I support the protest, but I was just hungry and tired and wanted my McDonald's. Story 76. I wasn't able to physically be at our protest today, but I wore my anti-fascist shirt and earrings, so I at least protested in my own way. It was really great seeing how many people turned out for our local protest. We cheered and honked as we drove through it. The energy was something else. Our town is pretty Make America Great Again, so seeing the crowd and hearing a bunch of honking from other cars was a much-needed boost of hope. Story 77. I was at an event in Southern California with family. 3 of my cousins, 1 of their adult children, and 2 of my aunts, who are both in their mid-70s and using rollators along with protest signs. It was great to see so many people of all ages there. We attended a gathering that I knew would be more low-key, but there was still a large group of about 1,000, maybe a little more, along both sides of Pacific Coast Highway. Story 78. I only have a petty personal hot take. If you are an American and put Louis XVI on your poster as someone Americans should dislike, you are mistaken. I saw this more than once during these protests. Unlike his French subjects, who were left to famine and abuses by his government, Americans were not. On the contrary, it was Louis's support that saved us and won the Revolutionary War. Without the Kingdom of France, therefore without the express support of Louis XVI, America would not have won its independence. Did he do it out of altruism? No, of course not. He did it to oppose the British. This does not change the fact that the democracy you are trying to preserve today was strengthened by that king. Story 79. Portland, Oregon checking in. I was amazed by the turnout. My wife and I were near the front of the march, and every time the route allowed us to get a good view back to where we started, the streets were packed as far as the eye could see. It was like the event never ended. Incredible. The highlight was when the march spontaneously broke out into song, "Happy Birthday, Forget You," directed at the former president, while waiting for roads to clear. Definitely the biggest protest I have seen since the 2017 Women's March. Learning that the national estimate is over 11 million attendees completely increased my faith in this country. Story 80. It was quite impressive. I live in a quiet town. The Downtown Association puts a lot of work into our monthly art and music evening, and there are a couple of hundred people wandering around. Today, people kept coming continuously. There were crowds and lines all across downtown, about 4,000 people. I hope it made a statement to my few neighbors who support Donald Trump that this community does not agree with them. Story 81. Yes, great turnout. It feels good to be reminded that we are not alone and that we greatly outnumber the fascists. Story 82. I am on a small island, and the turnout was the best I have seen. Despite the rain, everyone stayed a long time and many had signs. The support from passing traffic was great as well. It really made me feel good about my community. Story 83. Asheville showed up with more than 6,000 people. Our adult children joined us, and I have never felt as proud of them as I am now. Story 84. I'm still blown away. I'm located in a small town in Orange County, California, with less than 35,000 people, and I was expecting there to be maybe 100 people or so. It is being reported that there were over 6,000 in Orange County. Today was the first time I have actually felt a tinge of hope since November. Story 85. It gave me a much-needed chance to scream, let my emotions out, and commiserate with my city and my community. It is a positive turn, but we still have to keep fighting and speaking truth to power. Story 86. I tried to join but got stuck in line at Burger King. It felt like the universe was sending mixed signals. No kings, but extra fries. Story 87. I live in a small town in Ohio, a deeply Republican area. We had about 350 to 400 people show up. It was amazing to see. About 50% of passing cars honked in support, and only 3 to 4 cars protested the protesters. A neighboring town had a Republican protesting who did not support Donald Trump. Story 88. I voted and I am not going. If you did not vote, attend the protests. Non-voters put many people in danger. It is too dangerous for some of us to attend the protest. Story 89. It is sad that this thread is now a trap due to Donald Trump signing technology chief executive officers into the military and organizing mass surveillance of American citizens. Every American leaving a digital fingerprint admitting they displeased their dictator is now at risk. Story 90 showed up at my place. Glad to see so many people, and more importantly, I'm glad to see those people talking to strangers and networking so that they can form protests independently. That said, there needs to be a step 2 here. I will visit the same location tomorrow. Others might have the same idea, and see if anyone has any ideas for a long-term plan. My immediate thought is more protests like this from now until 2028, but this seems likely to cause burnout. It also seems like something my city wouldn't agree to on a mass scale, even if it's only every Saturday or every other Saturday. Story 91. Cincinnati had a huge turnout. I have seen estimates of 6,000 to 10,000 people. It was very peaceful and well organized, and the signs were creative and hilarious. Story 92. 7,500 people in Knoxville, Tennessee, and surrounding towns like Oak Ridge and Maryville participated in protests. The Baltimore and Ohio Park Service reports a total of 11 million participants, making it the 3rd largest in history. Story 93. I wanted to have some joy, so I went out and adopted a dog instead of entrenching myself in yesterday's festivities. As for them, I will always support the exercise of protesting by citizens, whether I agree with the cause or not. Once we lose that ability, we lose the method of fighting for and voicing our freedoms. Story 94. Roanoke, Virginia here. The last protest I attended before this had about 40 people. Yesterday's protest had hundreds. Story 95. Good event, super well organized. I only saw 2.5 agitators, and I am not 100% sure about one of them, which is low considering how many supporters were there. Bystanders were mostly supportive, and I even saw someone talking some sense into a counter-protester. If it had been held at a busy commercial location to disrupt business and lasted a week, it probably would have been more effective. But for a one-day attention grab, I would say it was effective. Hopefully, we can gain momentum and have a more impactful protest from here. Story 96. My small, very red town put out 400 protesters and only about 6 counter-protesters. The liberal community support group that my friends and I started a couple of months ago put up a table and gave away bottles of water and granola bars. It was amazing. Story 97. It was a good message and a strong show of support for the rule of law. It will accomplish nothing. Roughly half the voting public follows Fox News, and a smaller but still significant number subscribe to Newsmax and One American News Network. These protests will be framed as violent, absurd, and un-American. They will say this in the same breath they described the military parade as a smashing success. At this point, we have very little time left to use our political process to remove Donald Trump. If something legal does not happen soon, we will be left with 2 options. Allow fascism to take over. Revolution. This comes from a pragmatist who, despite supporting Bernie Sanders, ultimately had no issue voting for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Story 98. Jersey Shore town for me and my dad. Very positive turnout. Peaceful, but the good kind of loud. Great group of people. Everyone was friendly and ready to be heard. The weather turned really bad partway through, but people stuck it out and had a good time. I haven't sung the national anthem in years, and when we sang it as a crowd, it felt like it meant something. Story 99. My husband and I went to downtown Chico, California. There were at least 4,000 people walking peacefully around a 4-block square area. People of all ages. I was so proud. Story 100. He thought he would have people yelling and cheering for him, and he would be an adored dictator, but that backfired on him. Story 101. Hi from South Carolina. We had a few hundred at 2 separate protests in the same area. My parents had a few thousand at theirs in North Carolina. Story 102. I was at the march in New York City. I was a bit concerned after the police violence in Los Angeles, but it turned out to be a typical New York City peaceful protest. There were a lot of police, but they were either guiding the march or just standing around without any special gear. Actually, I wish the police had done a bit more. There was a man harassing people, yelling in their faces, and when people asked the police to intervene, they did not. I have no idea whose side he was on. He was just yelling about the civil rights movement. The turnout seemed large from what I saw, about 7 whole blocks of people, possibly up to 50,000. However, it was not overly crowded or disorderly to the point of blocking all foot traffic. I am always happy to see people come out for a good cause and love seeing the creative signs. Protests and parades are common here, so it felt rather normal, but on the large side. I'm sure the rain stopped many people from attending. I would love to see aerial footage if it exists. Someone with a speaker was playing a great song too. No Kings by Jesse Wells, which you can find on YouTube. It made the event feel like an iconic 1960s protest. Overall, I am glad to see the number of people who came out nationwide. The organizers did a good job. Story 103, Seattle. 70,000 according to Seattle Police Department. I was there, so actually 70,001. Kidding aside, it was boisterous, happy, and peaceful. Most signs and chants were either pro-democracy or anti-immigration and customs enforcement, pro-immigrant. Lots of United States flags and other patriotic symbols. I feel that the opposition crystallized today. Story 104. Grand Rapids, Michigan checking in. Tended, supported, and spread the word. Think for yourself. Question authority. Story 105. I now believe completely that Donald Trump stole the election. I strongly disagree with him, the grand old party, and all his supporters. The only reason I am agnostic rather than atheist is that I hope there is a God. That is why Tornado Alley is also known as the Bible Belt. Story 106. 3.5 to 4% of the United States population, around 11 to 12 million people across the country. This was enough to cause former President Trump to backtrack and admit that the immigration and customs enforcement raids were problematic and that they should not be targeting non-criminals. Story 107. I was there. Nothing has changed. Poor leadership. Corrupt Congress and Senate. Excessive taxes. We have failed. Story 108. Attended by about 80,000 others in Philadelphia. Very peaceful with no reported police activity. a positive and determined group. Turnout may have been reduced by rainy weather and poor air quality. Story 109. I went to my small town in Wisconsin's protest. Everyone was very positive except for a few bad actors being rude with Donald Trump flags or Make America Great Again hats. Story 110. Indianapolis here. It was beautiful. I moved here a little over 20 years ago. Back then, this city was not as diverse as it is now, or at least it did not seem like it. Being from Southern California, Indianapolis felt monocultural. Yesterday, it was a cornucopia of different people. Young and old, there were many different cultural backgrounds coming together for a common cause. What made it even better was the fact that Pride was happening downtown too. The vibe was perfect. The signs were witty and everybody was awesome. Story 111. I was unable to attend due to childcare. I would love to see this commentary. I propose there should be a financial protest as well. Hold our money hostage to show the true power the people have together. Big corporations need a reminder of who truly allows capitalism to exist in this country. Story 112. Redding, California, here. It's pretty rural around here, but we still had around 1,600 people at our local No Kings protest and a lot of support from people driving by. I was very excited about the level of support. It was the biggest protest I have seen locally, and I have been attending them for a while now. Story 113. I am a supporter, but I do not have insurance. On the off chance that it became violent and I went to the hospital, I would go deep into debt. Not to mention that I still live with my parents, who agree on paper but would still be very upset if I went to the hospital while uninsured. Story 114. I am not American, but I strongly support the No Kings protest. The United States was built on the very idea of democracy, and Donald Trump is undoing that. Story 115. I went to my office and made a quick $20,000 signing an overseas contract. If these protesters put as much effort into themselves as they do worrying about others, they might actually become something in life. Story 116. Went to the mine for a little out of curiosity. I couldn't stay long because of work. It was interesting, but in my area, there was a strange white savior complex about it. I live in Baltimore City. The large majority of residents are naturally black. That is just how urban demographics work. There were thousands of people at this protest, but about 75% were white. Story 117. It went great where I went. Everyone kept it upbeat and classy. We protested, and we had brunch. Overall, a good morning. Story 118. I did this in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We had a huge turnout for a city that is in a red county and a red state. It had to be several thousand. I have never seen anything like it here. That being said, it is a start. We have to keep it going. The good thing is people now have the signs ready for the next one. Everyone was really feeling the camaraderie. It gave a certain type of high in a much-needed, difficult time. I think that emotion alone will drive people to return or recruit more people to come out. I would like to see future protests feature elected Democratic leaders getting out there in the thick of their communities, showing up for their constituents, and laying out how they will oppose this administration. Story 119. Movements like this are less about a single protest and more about a shift in consciousness. It is not anti-authority. It is pro-accountability. Story 120. I spent the day outside working on my car and doing gardening. I think the whole situation is really unwise, and by participating, you are making Donald Trump a king. Is he or anyone supposed to care that a group of people who already dislike him and constantly compare him to Adolf Hitler are now calling him a king? You are practically stroking his ego at this point. Story 121. I think if people spent time protesting the media for hiding Joseph R. Biden Jr. and the Democratic National Committee for not having an open primary, they might have been able to avoid the Walmart-funded protests. Story 122. One of my thoughts is that I feel we got the American flag back. I couldn't help but associate anyone who flew an American flag over the past 8 years with Make America Great Again. After seeing so many today, it felt good to have it back and show everyone what America should really stand for. Story 123. I did, and it was huge. I honestly cannot remember seeing a crowd this big and united ever in my life. Edit. Hey conservatives. It is very obvious how scared you all are, and I want to let you know that your downvotes will not save you. My favorite part of the protest yesterday was seeing how absolutely unafraid and ready to disrupt your lives every single person was. We are tired of Trump, that means you as well. You will be dealt with worse than you could have ever imagined and should be terrified of how angry everyone is at you and how you have dehumanized yourselves. Nobody will feel bad for what happens to you all, and it is your own fault. Story 124. What a waste of time and money. What exactly do you think is going to change now? Illegal immigrants are still going to be deported. Immigration and customs enforcement is not going to stop. Story 125. It is great that the turnout across the country was impressive, but unless it turns into votes in the midterm elections, all is wasted. Story 126. Went for Boston Pride plus no kings, so I knew it would be positive, celebratory, and upbeat. The parade seemed to go on much longer than in previous years. It is not often that we get to see people of all ages, ethnicities, countries, fashions, genders, and backgrounds all coming together in support and opposition, especially since we tend not to talk about these things at work. It was emotional, and I was in tears by the end of the night. Story 127. I think if it does not break down into rioting, then it is wonderful. I was in Philadelphia for the protest. Story 128. What specific material changes were demanded? What material changes occurred? Will there be a next step when things are different today? I understand low-stakes events like this potentially offer an entry point for people looking to get more active. However, if this is not followed by more goal-oriented action outside what the state deems acceptable, then it was just performative. For example, 50,000 marched in Seattle while 10 miles south, a small handful of mutual aid groups were actually blockading the immigration building, trying to prevent immigration and customs enforcement kidnappings. If even 1% of the Seattle No Kings participants had shown up, they would have been able to hold the line. Story 129. Philadelphia. I am underwhelmed. Many people showed up, many made witty signs, and politicians came and spoke. Then everyone left. The best sign I saw said, "Protests won't work until they disrupt business," or something to that effect. Everyone dislikes the former president, and even those who support him acknowledge that the country and the world are in serious trouble. I am tired of doing the same things and expecting different results. The economic system needs to be overhauled, but the people benefiting from it also control the policies that regulate it. It is an unjust cycle that will continue to oppress people and harm the environment until we truly begin disrupting the economy and the ruling class's ability to maintain power. Story 130. These protesters do not understand that if there were a king or fascism, any attempt to protest would result in being beaten and taken to jail immediately. They are simply misguided individuals without awareness. Story 131. I did not, but I had a good reason this time. Next time, I will be in Portland. Tens of thousands showed up. Story 132. Aussie here supporting you from afar. It restores my faith in the American people to see the numbers at No Kings versus the squeaky-wheeled tanks in front of no crowds. Story 133. I didn't even bother to leave the house. I just watched the parade on the television because I expected old tanks. I saw old tanks. I am happy. Story 134. It is mostly virtue signaling by people who want to show how democratic they are. When it comes to local issues that they can impact in a progressive way, their liberal virtues go out the window because it is too close to home. It is all a show. Story 135. Went to the Honolulu event. We had an amazing turnout. Event organizers estimated between 7,000 and 10,000 people showed their support, with many more cars passing by and demonstrating their support. It was amazing to be around anti-fascists. Story 136. I've never felt so nervous going to a march. I am old and have been to my share, but it was a smooth experience with no negative incidents and happy people. It was heartening to see that we are not alone, which is how it can feel sitting at home doom-scrolling. I am undecided about how much good it did. Where I live is heavily surveilled, and masks are illegal, so it feels risky to be out there too. But it feels necessary. Feels very, very necessary. Story 137. Went to my local protest. It was a lot of fun. I learned some news I had not known before. There was a good turnout. I do not protest often. This was my first time attending one. Since I have trouble standing still, I just wandered around and talked to people. People are right to be concerned because part of the original American Revolution had to do with the military being used against the citizens they are sworn to protect. Story 138. The whole world is cheering for you. It was great to see all the people protesting and Donald Trump failing miserably. Keep doing it. Hopefully, you will get rid of him sooner or later. Story 139. One side is protesting something that does not exist in the United States of America, and the other is counter-protesting people who believe kings exist and that we are under so-called tyranny. Please, people, get a grip on reality. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.